Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to this month's Pleach Talk. Pleach India Foundation, with its mission to impact the world through the power of Indian cultural heritage, continues to build meaningful dialogues that connect the past with the present. As part of our efforts to disseminate heritage knowledge, the Please Talk series has been fortunate to host speakers from across the disciplines of history, archaeology, anthropology, art history, and heritage conservation, receiving immense support and appreciation from our ever growing audience. Today, we are privileged to host Gopal Joge sir, Assistant Professor in Indian Art at Department of Ancient History, Culture and Archaeology, Deccan College, Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. Mr. Joge brings with him 18 years of teaching and research experience with his scholarship centered on the art and architecture of early medieval South Asia. His research spans temple architecture, sculptural iconography, and narrative art traditions across the Deccan and beyond, including the studies on early Brahminical rock cut caves in coastal Maharashtra, the iconographic evolution of goddess imagery, and sculptural narratives of the Krishna Lila in temple art. He has authored numerous research papers published in peer reviewed journals and edited volumes, and his work continues to be widely cited within the field of Indian art history and archaeology. This evening, he will be speaking on formations and forms, early sculptural art of Vidarbha. On behalf of Pleach India Foundation, I extend a warm welcome to Mr. Joge and to all our participants joining us today. Thank you.
Hello.
Sir.
Yes. Warm good evening to all of you and happy Raksha Bandhan. Can you allow me to share the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Then I can, yeah.
Yes, sir. Kindly share the PPTs.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Now, my PPT is visible to all the audience,
Yes, sir.
and the audio is in proper frequency.
Yeah.
So, thank you all of you. Thank you for participating in such an important lecture series that is being organized by the Pleach organization, Pleach Foundation. This is a lecture 81. As Sanatanji have introduced myself, thank you for his kind introduction. Today, I will be going to talk on the formation and forms, early sculptural art of Vidarbha. The topic is came out through the long engagement towards the art and architectural traditions of the Vidarbha region. As we know that the Vidarbha is an integral geographical component of the Deccan region. So therefore, when we talk about the pan-Deccan cultural traditions, in this cultural tradition, Vidarbha region has a pivotal role in case of the understanding of the pan-Deccan cultural tradition. There are several standpoints to understand these cultural processes. One of the standpoint can be of the literature, one of the standpoint can be of the social tradition, one of the standpoint can be the political history of the Deccan, the geography also can be taken as an important standpoint, through which the cultural history of the Deccan can be get understood. With a similar view, the art can be taken as one of the important factor to get to understand the cultural processes of the day. With this view, in today's discussion, I will try to get emphasize on the Vidarbha region, which has the long history, and this can be understood through the diverse type of the material evidence. As far as the excavations that were carried out in the Vidarbha, through those excavations, the cultural continuity of this region can be get understood. To complementary to those archaeological evidence, the literary tradition also can be get associated with it. So therefore, there is no need to go into the details of the what the historical antiquity of the Vidarbha is there as one of the geographical entity whose traces can be seen beginning from the later Vedic period and was consistently referred as one of the Janapad. Not only that, during the historical period, the presence of the Vidarbha as an independent cultural entity can be traced. So therefore, the region has a significant place when it's come to be when it's come to the understanding of the cultural history of the Deccan region. So in today's discussion, I will going to attempt to discuss few of these points that includes the early traces of sculptural art in Vidarbha, especially of the historical period. Then, what were the factors through which this sculptural art was shaped? Religious tradition, the political settings, the social factors. How this was in the backdrop of the making of the art of Vidarbha region will be a point of discussion in today's talk. We'll try to see that how the political center and the political patronage has also had played a very crucial role into the proliferation of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region. Obviously, in the same context, the types of the material that has been utilized for the various visuals also will be a point of today's discussion. Stone, metal, terracotta. Simultaneously, it also need to be get see the nature of the craftsmanship that has been reflected through the available sculptural evidence or the art object. What does it indicate? Basically, the point is that through the early sculptural tradition of the Vidarbha region, what kind of trends that has been introduced how those trends were seen disseminated into the adjoining region of the Vidarbha. So this will be an important point of our further discussion. Then it will followed by the iconographic themes and motifs that were seen in the early sculptural art. What kind of the iconographic themes and motifs were continued? What types of the iconographic themes and motifs were discontinued? That also need to be get traced to the what available examples are there. Then it need to be placed into the broader context of the types of structures that are available at present, and to see those structures in cultural and religious context. Since as the period that we are going to get discussed in today's talk is a very significant period, the period which has the number of general connotations, and with those connotations, most of the time it gets forget that how the several regional entities were emerging in the late early historical period, and how those geographical entities were introducing some innovative visual concepts through which the art tradition of the Vidarbha region was shaped. So this will be an important point of today's discussion. Then it will followed by the what kind of the stylistic characteristics are seen in the structural art of Vidarbha. It need to be revisited. Then it will followed by the what are the important archaeological sites and temple complexes where these early structural specimens can be seen, and the key sculptures that exemplifies the artistic trends of the period. And it need to be also understand that what kind of the impact of these traditions have left, what kind of the legacies that can be traced into the later period. So therefore, in today's discussion, I will be going to get focused in a very short period, and that period is commonly associated with the in general historical notion as the period of the Gupta Empire, the period in between 3rd century CE to the 6th century CE. These centuries has marked the important shift into the sculptural tradition. Sometimes the period also has the connotation of the classical period of the Indian art. It also has the connotation of the golden age of the Indian history. So these kinds of the connotations are seen associated with these centuries. So beyond these connotation, it would be interesting to see that how the regional traditions were seen. For that matter, it need to keep slightly away the what general perceptions are there about this period, and to need to look in fresh way that how the several regions in the Deccan region was playing the important role into the development of the art tradition of this region. As we know that what the historical references are there about the number of geographical entities that were seen during the historical period. For that matter, it need to also revisit a little bit what kind of the scholarly observations are there. So in that case, the historical art of the Deccan region in general was seen traced beginning from the imperial rise of the Satavahanas. The Satavahanas were the one of the prominent dynasty under whom the pan-Deccan perhaps was politically unified. It was also the period in which the various types of the art trends were seen. And not only the art trends, as well as the architectural trends were seen. It also shows the diverse types of the subjects to which these art traditions were shaped. It is of the stone sculptures, the terracotta figurines, the metal art, the painting. So these types of the visible materials were seen extensively utilized during the period of the Satavahanas. So it was an important period in which the early sculptural art of the Deccan region was in shape, and in which one of the entity was Vidarbha region. So these also need to be looked into the geographical context, that what kind of the trends were seen in case of the western Maharashtra. In case of the Maharashtra, in case of the western Maharashtra, it was seen predominated by the rock cut cage. In contrary to it, when it comes to the central part of the Maharashtra, where there is a, a flat land, where there was the main political center, as we can refer, the capital of the Satavahanas was at Paithan, that was Pratishthan, in present Marathwada region of the Maharashtra. In that region, there was the main political center. So therefore, the kind of the art material that we find in the Marathwada region, for example, one of the finest specimens we could see from the Ter and the other early historical sites that was revealed through the archaeological excavations. After crossing the Marathwada, as far as the what present geographical divisions are there, we enters into the Vidarbha region. And Vidarbha also has the two geographical zones, that is of the eastern Vidarbha and the western Vidarbha. It covers the present administrative nature of the Vidarbha is. When it's come to the Vidarbha region during the Satvana period, There are number of sites from which the early art specimens of the Satwan period were came into the studies. For example, these specimens are found at Pauni, followed by excavations at Adam. The next important site is the Bhol, Pavanar, Gokardan, Arni. These are the some excavated sites from which the art specimens of the Satwan period were recovered. This art specimen shows its interesting context. Some of the art specimen shows its architectural context, such as that you can see on your screen. The railings found at Pauni once was a part of the stupa railings. Apart from it, the number of terracotta objects were recovered from other sites, such as Adam can be referred as one of the prominent sites where the types of the terracotta figurines were reported. Similarly, the other sites also can be seen in the same context. So, in a brief, the early trends that you see in the art tradition or sculptural art tradition of the Vidarbha region, that mainly seen during the Satwan. Now, when it's come to the art of the Satwan period, what we in general referred in the art history, the historical art of the Deccan region, that has tried to get emphasized by the several scholars. We need to be acknowledge their observation in present discussion, such as we can trace this discussion on the scholarly work of the K.V. Soundararajan, T. Shivaramamurthy, some extent Krishnadeva, followed by Professor M.K. Davlikar, Jamkhedkar, Deglurkar, S.B. Dev, Amrendranath. So these are the scholars have tried to take these art specimens in the larger context of the art tradition of the Indian subcontinent. And broadly, the early art tradition that are located in the Satwan period were tried to discuss in context of the Bharhut, Sanchi, and in some extent how the North Central Indian trends were initially were introduced in the Deccan region. For example, Nagarjunakonda, Amravati, and other Buddhist sites, where this tradition may have initially adopted, and through this initial adoption, further the independent regional tradition perhaps was evolved. So it shows the nature of the integration of how the North Central Indian tradition were seen during the early sculptural art of the Deccan region as well as into the Vidarbha region. The Pauni can be taken as the best example where the influence of the Bharhut can be traced. But however, when it gets continued into the later centuries of the Satwan period, the gradual change and transformation can be seen, especially the exhibition of the sculptural form, followed by the various forms of the narrations, the motifs, the symbols that were seen slowly, gradually, have begun to get picked up the local tradition, local regional ingredients were seen adopted into the sculptural, early sculptural tradition of the Deccan region, as well as same can be said about the Vidarbha region. As Amrendranath had rightly pointed out in his excavation report at Adam, that how it was the metropolitan center of the Satwan period and where the Greco-Roman art influence can be seen. Alongside of it, the local trend also can be seen. Basically, these can be seen through the terracotta figurines that are found at Adam. With this background, we also need to get highlight that these early art tradition, by and large, was coming through the religious affiliation of the Buddhism. So Buddhism was the major religious entity through which these art traditions were proliferated. Not only the proliferated, it also was disseminated into the pan-Deccan region. Now, here is the interesting point that how this process of the dissemination can be seen. And with this understanding, the Vidarbha region need to be see that what is the place, what is the location of the Vidarbha in this context. Further, it need to be see that how the bas relief was prepared, what kind of the subjects were introduced, what kind of the compositions were seen, what kind of the stylizations can be understood through the available examples. And further, how after 3rd and 4th century CE, the trends were seen changing rapidly. The new faith and new beliefs were seen introduced through the art object. Okay? And that shift is the more crucial in case of the what sculptural art we are going to discuss in today's talk with the geographical entity of the Vidarbha region. Now, these are some early sculptural specimens that can be seen. And as we know, the major shift were seen during the Satwan period. And in the late Satwan period, when we enters in the Vakataka period, was the Vakatakas, in which the major change and transformation seen in the sculptural art. The period is roughly placed in between 3rd century CE to the 5th century CE. The fruitful phase of the art of the Vidarbha region. Not only the Vidarbha region, even in the Pan-Deccan region. It was this phase where several new trends and traits were seen in the sculptural art. In case of the political history of the Vakatakas, is divided into two branches, the eastern branch and the western branch. The capital of the eastern branch was at Nandivardhan, the present Nagardhan, situated in Nagpur district of Vidarbha. And another branch was ruled on the place called Vatsagulma, the present Washi. This split into the Vakataka family had also seen having the great relation with the what art traditions were seen. With this major political change, it also need to be get highlight that it was in the same period the main political center which earlier was at central part of the present Maharashtra, that is at Paithan, was seen shifted towards the Vidarbha region, and the Vidarbha region was adjoining to the Vindhyan, central India, towards its north, and towards east, it was also was adjoining to the Mahakosal region, and towards its south, it was adjoining to the Kuntal Desh, as far as what the historical geographical entities were there. And subsequently, the Vakatakas were rose as an imperial power. The period is well acknowledged, as we know that how in the art history, in the post-independence period, it has tried to get achieve its position into the art history of the Indian subcontinent. Earlier, the period often used to get referred in context of the Guptas. Now, in the present context, the independent presence of the Vakataka art can be seen. And obviously, the credit goes to the laborious work that has been done by the late Walter Spink, okay, with his study, with his engagement, long engagement with the Ajanta caves, okay, that at the end resulted that how yes, that has been resulted to give its due credit that how the art of the Vakataka period has the independent place into the art history of the Indian sculpture. Now this need to be get placed in the wider context, as we have referred the name of the water spring. In the same context, it need to be get referred the substantial contribution that has been given by the Professor Hans Bacher as well as the Dr. Zamkhedkar to get highlight the importance of the art history of the eastern branch of the Vakatakas. Initially, it was used to discuss in context of the few of the sculptural specimens that were reported from the Ramteg. Then after few excavations that were carried out in the Vidarbha region, okay, that has revealed the new and fresh evidence, okay, to see that how the sculptural art was developed in the eastern part of the Vidarbha. So one side there is the grand side, that is of the Ajanta, that is more controlled, that is seen having extensive in situ sculptural examples in context of the architecture. In case of the eastern part of the Vidarbha region, there are a few temples in which context the sculptural example can be seen. Whereas in the larger context of the Vidarbha, there are a number of loose sculptural examples which shows the nature of the how the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region was progressing. So therefore, it need to be seen into the wider context that how the several localities of the present Vidarbha having an examples of the sculptural specimens through which the early sculptural art of the Vidarbha region can be seen. And here is the main point of our today's discussion, that how the formation of the sculptural art can be seen and what types of the forms were introduced. What is the significance of that forms into the further progression of the art of the Deccan region, not only in the Deccan region, even in the pan subcontinent. So when we look to this development, it also need to be get highlighted that it was during this phase in between 3rd century CE to the 5th century CE the religious trends were changing. Initially, in case of the Satwan period, more or less it was in confined to the what Buddhist traditions were there. But gradually, onwards, 3rd century CE, the local beliefs and faiths probably was seen appropriated into the Brahmanical sects, mainly the Shaivism and the Vaishnavism. And with the emergence of these two important sects, Shaivites and the Vaishnavites, had brought the new waves into the sculptural tradition and also had brought the new themes into the sculptural tradition. Now, these need to be looked in context of the pan-Deccan region. And there is actually is the place of the Vidarbha. How the region always need to be get revisit in context of the how the art tradition was evolving. So therefore, this formation process of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha can roughly be placed in the three phases. The early phase that can be traced beginning from the Satwan phase or a Satwan period. What kind of the trends were seen during the Satvana rule. The second is of the mature phase that can be placed into the the political prominences of the Vakatakas. The period roughly can be placed in between 3rd century CE to the mid of 5th century CE. And then the third is of the dissolution of the Vakataka art, okay, or Vakataka sculptural art. And that period is also again a very crucial, which we can roughly place in between 5th century CE to the 6th century. Now, this process of the dissolution also is quite of interesting, that through which the art of the Deccan was shaped. So therefore, with the key examples that how the composition, the style, the execution, the craftsmanship, the material can be get revisit to see that how the region of the Vidarbha during the Vakataka rule was playing the pivotal role in the shaping of this sculptural art. So with few of examples, we'll go ahead. So these are the excavated sites from which the types of the art objects were recovered. In these sites, the most important is the excavation at Mandal. In this excavation, the whole of the sculptures were found. Bhadravati, having the early rock-cut caves of the Vakataka period, and it followed by the early Shaiva and the early Vaishnava, the sculptural examples. Batala, the excavation at Chandankheda, the Ramte, no doubt, is the most significant site. The Mansar, Nagardan, and many more. And in case of the western branch of the Vakatakas, the Washim can be taken as not only the pan Maharashtra, but across the Maharashtra region, this trend was traveling. Many more factors perhaps were responsible for this spread, but one of the prominent factor was the political control of the Vakatakas in this region. So therefore, these sculptures are need to be revisit that what kind of the trends, okay, that were introduced. So in case of the early phase of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha, the examples found at Mandal need to be revisit again. It is from the Mandal, the early sculptural specimen of the Vaishnavite traditions were reported. Alongside of it is the place from where the early sculptural specimens of the Shaiva faith was recovered. And it shows the kind of conglomeration of the sectarian trends and sectarian ideas that were tried to get introduced through the sculptural art. Now, in that case, certain points are need to be discussed here. For example, if you can see this image of the Balaram, okay, while bringing the divine personality of the Balaram into the early sculptural art of the Vidarbha region, it has brought the specific legends that were associated with this divine personality. Now, in this early phase of the sculptural art that is broadly placed by scholar in mid of 4th century CE or late 4th century CE. Now, it was the formative phase of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha in the post Satwan period. Therefore, it also shows the major transitions into the visual concepts. The very important main transition can be seen that how the divine legends were incorporated in the visual forms. The best example is of this image of the Balaram. Then next is how the divine concept were visualized with the idea of the multiplicity, likewise the multiple heads and the multiple hands. During the Satwan art, hardly we could see this concept of the multiplicity. It was very simple, very linear. Even the compositions also were seen very linear, but having the robust and heavy nature, as far as what the sculptural specimens were seen during the Satwan period. But in case of this transition phase in between 3rd century CE to the mid of 4th century CE, okay, sculptures were seen more stout, heavy, with some specific motifs, such as in case of the Balaram, it has brought with the legend of the Dhenuka Survat on his backside. The serpent coil can be seen. Also can see the how the Srivatsa motif is seen over the chest of the Balaram. The head is mutilated, but the features can be seen very loudly. Same can be seen in other examples also. This image of the Vasudev. Now here, the special features are completely changed as in compared to the what the Satwan period sculptural art was there. The face became more roundish. The heavy lips can be seen. The long ears and very typical idea of the Kirita Mukuta can be seen in the sculptural specimens that are found at Mandal. A very bold and broad depiction of the Yagyapavita. Again, though it has been identified as an image of the Vishnu, some scholars have tried to get identified it as Vasudev also. In some extent, some have tried to get contextualize this image of the Vishnu with the reference that is found in the Vakataka copper plate grand, okay, where there is a mention of the Monda song. So some scholar have tried to label it as an example of the Vishnu in the form of the Monda Swami. That might was one of the form of the Vishnu that was worshipped during the Vakataka period. But the idea is very independent. And the same trend was seen, whichever examples were reported from the mandal. We will go on the next. This you can see the image of the goddess sitting on the lion throne. Look at the body posture of this figure, the headgear, the physiognomy of this image. This also shows the changing parameters of the sculptural art during the Vakataka period. And it also marks the initial stage of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha. An image of the Parvati. In case of the what available sculptures of the Parvati are there in the Pan Deccan, the image found at Mandal can be taken as one of the earliest example where the initial iconographic concept of the Parvati can be seen. Now here also the same parameters can be seen. Stout, the face is round, the heavy drapery, the holding the kamandalu in the left hand and the right hand is broken. The heavy jata can be seen, the matted hair. And it stylistically is very unique. If you can see this specimen, it shows that it actually was initiated with what the original concepts were introduced into the early Brahmanical art or in the early Brahmanical iconography during the Vakataka period. There is a interesting references that we can collect from the inscriptions as well as from the what contemporary extract of the literary evidence are there. In case of the Vakataka period, it is seen a very productive period in this context. So therefore, these sculptures also need to be contextualized what the other cultural trends were existing in the region. So that we will highlight in our next discussion. This is the early example of goddess Durga or Mahishasura found at Mandal. It is quite contrary to the what early depictions of the Mahishasura that is seen in the Gupta domain, okay, or where there was a political affiliation of the Guptas. So therefore, the Vakatakas need not always has to be discussed in line of the what the Central Indian art were there, okay, which often had discussed in the notion of the art of the Gupta period. This is quite of aligned, quite independent, where the themes were visualized as per the local craft and as per the what the local religious settings were there. This is an image of the Naigamesh as identified it as. Same can be seen. This image has tried to identify as the image of the Samba. So in case of the nature of the visual nature of the Vaishnavism that is seen in this phase, the early phase of the Vakataka period, shows the sectarian trends, okay, that were manifested through these kinds of the images that is found in the Vidarbha. Then this image of the Brahma, a very innovative and unique concept of the Brahma can be seen here. Then followed by this image of the Shiva. shown holding the bow, in one hand holding the arrow, or can be the appearance of the Shiva is in ithyphallic posture. The very heavy jatas can be seen. Again, the same trend. The bulkier nature can be seen. And facial features goes continue as it is that is seen in the previous examples. And this is well known figure of the Shiva. Many more identifications are there. Some people call it as Sadashiv, some call it as Mahasadashiv, some have called it as Dwadashamukha Sadashiv, which has the layers of the literary connotations, also has its own sectarian context when this kind of the visible concept was introduced in the early sculptural art of the Vakataka period in the Vidarbha region. This is called as a Ashtamukha Shiva, having the 8 heads over the body of the Shiva. And now, in the late phase of the 4th and 5th century CE, it reaches in its mature phase. The kind of the sculptural examples that are seen in the mature phase of the Vakataka period in Vidarbha region, and this is the best example of the Ganga that is found at the Pauna. It was an accidental finding in which this beautiful image of the Ganga was found. Now the goddess, as usual, shown riding on the crocodile. And it also has the label inscription where her name is mentioned, can be seen here in the typical Brahmi script of the Vakataka period. And this figure of the Ganga in several features does differs from the what the images of the Ganga were seen in the core Gupta domain in the other parts of the country. Now here, as we could see that how the iconographic Ganga was evolved. The scholars have rightly pointed out that one of the earliest iconographic depiction of the river goddess can be traced beginning from the Ajanta. It was at the Ajanta caves where the iconographic position of the river goddess perhaps was introduced, where he was positioned at the Dorja. Subsequently, it also seen at the Udayagiri cave complex in central India. And with the same examples, the Ganga found at Paunar need to be get examined that how the sculptural art was changing. As we have experienced the early phase of the sculptural art from the sculptural hoard found at Mandal, and at subsequent to the Paunar, the trend was shifted with more slender, more elegant features of the figuring. The bodily features are more refined. Even the style of the drapery has also changed significantly. The ornaments, the facial features, so all these minor factors are seen became more proportionate, more symmetrical, And now it is moving towards the what the classical aesthetic sense were there. Now here it need to be get compared with the what the core art specimens of the Gupta period is there and what the art specimens of the Vakataka period is there. So these are the some other photographs of the same. And then it was the same place where the early examples of the narrative arts were reported, be it of the narrations of the Ramayana, be it of the narration of the childhood stories of the Krishna. And this shows that new themes were brought into the sculptural tradition. And the way it has been executed, it also shows the what the religious trends were prevalent in the Vidarbha region. Okay? And with this example, this can be testified. I'm moving my point, my time. We'll try to get finished as soon as possible. See this depiction of the Dhenukasur Vada or the Vatsasur Vada episode of the Krishna and Balaram, identified as Rama and Sita. This is of the when Balaram and Krishna goes at Mathura and he encounters Chanur and Mustik, and then at the end he kills comes. In the Krishna moving from Gokul to Mathura. This Bali Sugriva episode on at Pauna. The demise of the Dasharatha as it has been identified. The birth of Krishna. Similarly, this maturity of the sculptural art can be seen with this magnificent example of Nrsimha at Ramtek, which is identified or tried labeled as a Keval Nrsimha and Rudra Nrsimha, a very heavy, colossal example of the Nrsimha image during the Vakataka period, okay, and shows the maturity of the sculptural art in the Vidarbha region. And it appears that by the time Nrsimha was emerged as the deity of household worship, the example of the Trivikrama episode of the Vishnu at Ramtek. This also shows now it has shifted at next stage where the colossalness is seen as the important factor of the sculptural art of the Vakataka period. And as per the nature of the theme, okay, as per the nature of the concept, okay, the execution of the sculptures were seen. And so in case of this colossalness of the Trivikrama, that can be get experienced, that how it has been shown. These door figures are more interesting that are commonly seen during the Vakataka period, and this trend was widely accepted and was seen continue for a long period, which shows the one of the important influence and the legacy of the art of the Vidarbha region, or you can say the art of the Vakataka period in the later period. So these kinds of the decorative motifs, okay, the floral motifs, also were seen continue with the same elegance in the later period. That can be seen with this example. more details of the dwarf figures that we see. The colossal figure of the Varaha, or more accurate, Yajna Varaha. And this is now we can take as the key example of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region, or the early sculptural art of the Vidarbha region. The image found at Mansar excavation. Many more identifications are there, but you can see the craftsmanship, the, the aesthetic that has been brought in this example, where how the figure is portrayed. And now this shows the now it has reached in its mature stage in which it has tried to bring the what the divine concepts were there. Okay? Look at the positioning of the upper two hands, okay? The execution of the jata jute, okay? The ornamentation of the figure, and the way the figure is resting on a cushion, okay? That shows that how the royal art of the Vakataka period was changing, okay, in the 5th century CE. Okay? And this can be now get compared with the sculptural specimens that are found at Ajanta. So it shows now it became not remain only of the part of the Vidarbha, but slowly it has begun to get disseminate into the adjoining region of the Vidarbha. Now the trains that were introduced in the region also were seen continue for a long period, and not only that, it also was seen in the background of the what the stylistic development of the art were seen in the Deccan region. So in the portable art material, be it in of the stone and the other material, those also shows a very innovative concept and was seen remained as an integral part of the sculptural art of the Vidarbha, and it also shows its dissemination towards the other region. These are the specimens are found in the excavation at Nagardan, was recently excavated by our colleagues from Deccan College, and which shows now the mature phase and also shows the religious trends that were prevalent in the mature phase of the Vakataka, okay? And also shows the various types of the divine concepts, okay, that were widely accepted in the Vidarbha. Image of the Vishnu, broadly dated in 5th century CE. The head of the goddess. This is from Mansar, the dwarf figure, so can be called as a Bharva. Some of the floral motif found on the stone tiles is also found at Nagardan. The image of Lajja Gauri found at Mahursari, dated to the 5th century CE. This is Yagyavaraha. As per the records, it is said that it was found at Ramtek. It may not be also, but now it is kept in the Nagpur Museum. Image of the Vishnu, reported from Bhadravati. And this head of the Vishnu found at Nagartha. Now this shows the stylistic change in the features of the crown, which is not typical what the idea of the Kirita Mukuta were seen in the Gupta sculpture. Now here it shows the quite different concept of the visualizing of the idea of the Kirita Mukuta and the facial expressions of the Vishnu. In case of the metal images, these images of the Buddha figures found at Malapuri, it was an accidental finding, but shows the metal art of the Vakataka period in Vidarbha region. It also has its own unique feature. And then in recent finding, this seal of the Vakataka copper plate was recovered, and in which shows the goddess over the Vakataka inscription. Now, we are coming on the last part of our today's discussion. In between 3rd century CE to the 5th century CE, number of visual concepts were introduced in the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region. The first is that it was the phase of the major transition in the religious trend. The one hand, it was the Buddhism had achieved its culmination at Ajanta, that can be seen in the sculptural reliefs, narrative art of coming from the Buddhist tradition, and that also can be seen with the extensive examples of the wall paintings, where the several subjects that were seen as a part of the theology of the Buddhism was reached in its mature stage, and became a trademark of the development of the art tradition of the Deccan region is where they. In same context, when it's come to the rest of the Vidarbha, apart from Ajanta, as we have taken a review of the loot sculptures, the sculptures that were found in the excavations, and the images that are found at its architectural context. With these extensive examples, it shows the change into the faith and belief, especially the introduction of the Shaivism and Vaishnavism as one of the prominent faith, and that are well absorbed through the epigraphic examples, evidence are there, and the literary evidence are there. Apart from it, the period also can be seen in light of the literary treatises were reported from this period. As it has been credited by the scholar that some of the Vakataka rulers had compiled some of the couplets in the Gatha Saptashati, that has been credited to the Sarva Sen. Some Gathas were credited to the Narendra Sen, the Vakataka rulers. Apart from it, perhaps this was the first phase in the history of the Deccan, where local adoption of the Ramayana and Mahabharata was introduced. For example, it has been credited that it was Pravar Sen had compiled the Ravanavaho, the Prakrut Kavya. It also has been credited that it was the Vakataka period had compiled the Setu Bandha, also credited to the Pravar Sen. And it also said that it was the same period where the Hari Vijay was compiled, the childhood legends of the Krishna. Now, this is quite an interesting evidence in light of the development of the Puranic traditions were there. As we know that how the Bhagavad Puran and the Harivansh Puran had narrated the childhood stories of the Krishna in the Sanskrit. But in case of the Vakatakas, in of the 5th century CE, it was adopted in the Prakrit language. Same can be seen with the reference of the Setu Bandha and Ravana. Unfortunately, these textual treatises were not survived in its full length, but the later references and its quotations in a later period shows that these literary treatises were widely spread and widely acknowledged. Even it is said that these were also was referred in the several later Sanskrit literature until to the 12th, 13th century CE. This shows that the period was the trend maker, okay, where alongside of what the art specimens are there, which need to be seen in light of the what literary treatises were there. And perhaps these literary treatises may was influencing over the what available material evidence are there. For example, the narrative episodes that were found at Pauna is the noteworthy evidence, okay, for that matter. Apart from it, it shows the process of the maturity of the sculptural art, okay, and that can be testified with the evidence found at Mandal, where it shows the initial stage, okay, of the idea of the multiplicity, the idea of the physiognomy of the human figures, as well as the decorative motifs and the art motifs that we see, and how it has been reached immediately into its it's a mature state. Okay? That can be seen with the sculptural examples found at Mansar, then found at Nagardhan, at Ramtek, okay, and other several sites where these examples can be seen. Now, with this, we could infer that it was in the 5th century CE, the dissolution of the Vakataka art or the art, sculptural art of the Vidarbha can be seen. And as it has been consistently mentioned by the several Sanskrit scholars, especially, you can take the name of the Kalidas, can take the name of the Bhobhuti, as these were the Sanskrit scholars who had extensively influenced the contemporary Sanskrit literature, be it of the Kavya, be it of the prose. Now, it has been mentioned that it was of the Vachomi style, okay? And this Vachomi style had been identified as of the style of the Vidarbha region or the Vaidarbhi style. This is very quite interesting. The trend also seen in the Sanskrit language, where there is the independent recognition of the Vachomi style, okay? Vachomi Riti, it has been called, okay? Sanskrit compositions, okay? And that was favored by the Kalidas, and it also was favored by the Bhavabhuti. Okay? Some extent, same is applicable to the sculptural art also, where with these innovative concepts, with this the stylistic factor, okay, probably the Vaidarbhi style had formed in the Vidarbha region during the Vakataka period, and its desolation can be seen in the adjoining region even after the fall of the Vakatakas. The trends were well accepted in and around of the Vidarbha, such as we can trace the influence of the Vidarbha sculptural art in Dasharna Desh Mahakosa, which was seen as a political part of the Vakataka Empire, but subsequently it was ruled by the Nalas and then Panduvanshis and Somavanshis. But the sculptural art that we seen at Mahakosal, not only the sculptural art, the other art motifs, it shows its direct connection to the legacy of the Vakataka period, or shows the legacy of the what examples found at the Vidarbha region. in the western part of the Maharashtra, in the recent researches and with the examples of the Jogeshwari and Elementa, it shows the continuity of the what Vakataka legacies were there. And in case of the south of the Vidarbha, okay, and the Vakatakas were having the matrimonial alliance with the Kadambas of the Vanvasi, then subsequently from the Kadambas of Vanvasi, in the Kuntal Desh was the rise of the Chalukyas of Vatapi. Together, when it's contextualized in what the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region is there, okay, that also can be get seen with the continuity of the legacy of the sculptural art of the Pagataka period or the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region in this region also. And same context can refer the art of the Vishnu Kundin period, the Andhra and Telangana region, also shows the continuity of the legacy of the Vakataka period. So this is what I wanted to get discuss in today's talk, that how the early sculptural art of the Vidarbha was not remained as confined to the what Vidarbha region was there, but subsequently it was seen spread in the adjoining region, and through which the new stylistic notions were evolved. Okay. In general, in art history, we call it the style of the Dashaharnadesh, or the Chalukyan style, the Vishnu Kundin style, or the style of the Pandavansha Somanshi. We can forget what its dynastic affiliation is there. But the trend that were set in the mature phase of the Vakataka period were seen continue for a long period and had left its unremovable traces in the art history of the Deccan region. Okay. So, therefore, in general history of the art of the Deccan, okay, the Vidarbha region has its own place, has its own mark to see the journey of the historical art of the Deccan. So here I will stop. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for the opportunity that is given by the Pleach organization to discuss this topic of my, which is close to my heart. Uh, I hope what I wanted to get convey have reached to the audience. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Personally, and on behalf of Pleach India Foundation, we are very thankful to you, sir, for this exhaustive, comprehensive, and insightful talk on the sculptural art of early sculptural art of Vidarbha. Because we are when we talk about Shatavahanas, Amaravati comes to our mind. When we talk about Vakatakas, Ajanta comes to our mind. Whereas when we talk about Guptas, Mathura, these centers comes to our mind, and rarely we think about Vidarbha. And most of us were not even aware that Vidarbha as a region where early Indian art flourished so extensively, and some of the images what you have shown us, sir, like for example that Krishna on chariot, that life-size image, we don't find such images anywhere else in India. So it was such a enlightening talk for all of us, and thank you once again, sir, for this wonderful talk. And if our audience, if you have any queries, you can share. We can take a few questions. So if you have any queries, please post it in the chat box. So we have S.K. Aruni sir is asking, what were the art texts for the Vakataka arts?
Can you repeat the question?
So what are the art texts mainly followed by the Vakatakas?
Art trends.
Art texts, sir. Shilpa Shastras. What kind of Shilpa Shastras were
Yes,
there?
yes, yes. Okay, okay, okay. Uh, in case of the text, we do not find any kind of this standard textual tradition during this period. It was since was a very initial phase where uh, the scriptures on the Shilpa Shastra was yet to be get introduced. We can see that how in the later period the prescriptions of the Varnamira's brother Sita was followed. Then the prescription of the Vishnu Dharmatar Puran was seen followed. But in case of the sculptural art that is seen during the Vakataka period, it is difficult to get correlate with what the prescriptive texts are there. In case of the descriptive text, that can be get applicable. For example, we can take of uh, the, the popular narratives of the Ramayana or the Valmiki Ramayana. That can be get contextualized with the what the images at Paunar has been reported. In case of the childhood episodes of the Krishna, the Bhagavad Puran can be taken discussion that what kind of the narrations were introduced. Okay. So these kinds of descriptive text are more useful to get to understand what the early sculptural specimens of the Vakataka periods are there. In case of the visual concepts that are seen in the available evidence, for that matter, the epigraphic evidence are more crucial. In the Vakataka appropriate grants, we get several references of the mention of the deities. For example, Vishnu has been mentioned as the Monda Swami, a very unique name of the Vishnu. Perhaps was the local form of the Vishnu, or may it was the royal form of the Vishnu, which was venerated by the royal members of the Vakataka family, and therefore his name was mentioned like this. Then, in case of the sectarian concept that were involved into the art specimens, those are also very significant. In case of the Vaishnava tradition, it shows the what the Sattvatas and the Pancharatra concepts were there, and were tried to get manifest through these kinds of images. And therefore, at Mandal there is an image of the Vasudev, there is an image of the Balaram, and there is an image of the Samba. Okay? It can be called as Samba. Okay? So this shows that these were coming from the certain concept and the certain ideas of what the early Vaishnavite beliefs were there. Same can be said about the Shaivism also. Now, it was the first Vakatakas who had took the title such as the Parama Mahabhairava Bhakta. Okay? It was the first dynasty who had took proudly their name of the deity as they were the follower of the worshipper of the Mahabhairava. The possibility is that with these kinds of the epithets that were taken by the Vakataka rulers, perhaps has some bearing on what the sculptural evidence are found in the Vidarbha region. For example, that Dwadasha Mukha Sadashiv, so called, is the best example of it. The Ashtamukha Sadashiv also can be taken with the same way. Similarly, it was the Vakataka inscription also had given the description of the few of the images. For example, the Mandal copperplate brands of the Vakatakas does describes the earliest epigraphic narration of the Sheshashai Vishnu. It describes that how the Vishnu reclines over the serpent coil, how many hands he is having, and what attributes he hails. Okay, so that kind of the description are referred in uh, the Vakataka appropriate grants, which shows that uh, it was into the proper correlation of what religious trends were existing within the region, and according to it, perhaps the iconographic manifestations were seen. Okay? In case of the image found at Mansar, okay, which is tried to get identified as a Vamana Shiva, okay, it does not have any textual reference for it, okay, or prescriptive reference of it, how to make an image of the Vamana Shiva, okay, as scholars had identified it. But as far as what the descriptive texts are there, for example, in Shatarudriya, okay, So one of the epithet of the Shiva has been mentioned as a Vamana Shiva. And the scholar had believed that might be that epithet during the Vakataka period had manifested in that image found at the Mansar. So these kinds of the descriptive trends need to be brought together to get understand what the sculptural art of the Vakataka period is. So therefore,
Yes, sir.
so hardly we can use what prescriptive text are.
Thank you.
Interestingly, I forgot to mention uh, in Samarangam Sutradhar, which is recently been well discussed by the Adam Hardy in his studies of the architecture. Uh, in the reference of the Samarangam Sutradhar, it mentions the separate independent architecture style of the Vidarbha region. It mentioned as the Varata style, Varata style, Varata, or Varata style. Perhaps was the evolving phase of the what the temple architectural styles were there. Okay? We are aware about the Nagar style, we are aware about the Dravida style, we are aware about the Karnataka Dravida style, Bhumija, and so on and so forth. Similarly, in the formative phase of the architecture style or of the temple architecture style, there also was the mention of the Varata style. And those were tried to get identified with the surviving architecture examples that is found in the Chhattisgarh region, such as uh, Lakshman Temple at Shirpur, then Rajiv Lochan Temple at Razin. Okay? So these are the some examples of the temple architecture which Hardy believed might have some connection to the Varata style that has been mentioned by the Bhoje in his Saramanga Sutradhar in 11th, 12th century CE. So this is quite fascinating to see that it was not only limited to the what sculptural examples were there, but alongside there also was an architectural style.
Uh, Thank you, sir. We have a couple more questions. Miss Rohini, she wants to know if Shatavana art is continued in the later historical periods of Vidarbha. If yes, which site we can we find the evidences?
In case of the what available evidence are there, hardly we could trace any continuity of the Satvana art. Okay, in case of what stylistic features are. In case of the composition and themes that we've seen at Ajanta and elsewhere in the Buddhist rock cut caves, there some scholars have tried to trace the continuity of the Amravati and Nagarjun Konda in the sculptural art of the Vidarbha region. This can be cited with the example of the well research of the Dr. Srikant Pradhan. In his studies, he had explore that how the themes and composition of the Amravati and Nagarjun Konda had greatly influenced the themes and composition that were seen at Ajanta sculptural art and also paintings also. Even it shows the kind of integration of the what the contemporary fine arts were there, be it of the painting, be it of the metal art, or be it of the sculptural art, which shows uh, the links of it. In case of the what Western Indian rocket art of the Satwan period is there. Okay? That is not as it is adopted in the Vakataka period. We can take an example of the Mandal code of the sculptures. There we can't see any kind of the traces of the influence of the Satwan art, okay? Satwan sculpture. So this need to see the evidence wise or the example wise what kind of the traces were seen, the continuity and discontinuity of the stylistic feature of the Satwan. In case of the terracotta also, it shows the major shift of what terracotta figurines were seen in Satwan period and what kind of the terracotta figurines were seen in the uh, Vakataka period. Because subjects were changed. Okay? And those subjects we can decode it. For example, we can see the terracotta figurines of the Naigameshi, we can see the terracotta figurines of the Narsiya and other Brahmanical deities that were uh, seen prevalent in these centuries. So therefore, subjects were changed, themes were changed, and might these change was the result of the what the beliefs and the practices were changed in this period. So this shows the major shift in case of the what the available literary and epigraphic evidence are there and what the material evidence are. So it means now it need to see in the wider context, okay, what stylistic features were evolving in the centuries that was a part of my today's discussion.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question from our CEO, Sir Dr. Shivanagi Reddy. All the way from US, sir is attending the talk. And sir says it was an excellent talk with the wonderful picks filling the gaps in the evolution of art in the Deccan, particularly Vakataka and the Vishnu Kundins. And he says that can we say that through Vakataka art influenced the Vishnu Kundin sculptural art? For example, the sculptures recovered from Kesaraghatta. He's asking for your opinions.
Yeah, the scholars have tried to show these links also. It means that how it is seen that initially the Vishnu Kundins were in the political alliance with the Vakatakas. In their initial stage, they might was the subordinate of the Vakataka. And after the fall of the Vakataka, they rose as an independent power. The region of the Vishnu Kundins, which was more close to the region of the core region of the Vakatakas, especially in the Vidarbha region, and that shows the continuity. For example, can take of how the early narrative art of the Ramayana, especially that is seen in the caves of the Vishnu Kundin period, shows the relation of the Vakataka craftsmanship and its continuity in the region of the Vishnu Kundins. And even it shows the major uh, transition in form of the what regional variations were seen in the Deccan region. As per the period, as per the local beliefs, okay, maybe these trains were adopted, okay, and based on those adoption, the further progression can be seen. For example, we can take an example of the Chalukyan caves at Badami, where it shows that how the interior and exterior decorations were planned. Perhaps that also have some link to the early examples found in the Vidarbha region, especially the Gana figure that you see at the Adhishthana of the Badami caves, which shows the direct relation of the Vakataka influence. Same in case of the narratives of the Krishna's childhood stories that is seen in the cave number 3, perhaps have some link to the influence of the Vakataka period. This is well discussed by the several scholars to show the bearing of the Vakataka influence into the later period. I think Rajan sir also had discussed the same thing, same points to highlight in his magnificent book, The Art of Deccan.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question. Once again, it's from SK Aruni, sir. Do you think that the Buddhist artists were responsible for Vakataka art?
Difficult actually, artist religious affinity is difficult to determine because we do not know the artist in which faith he belongs. That their migration, their shifting from one place to another place can be traced, and it is well discussed by the Walter Spink that how after the fall of the Vakatakas, after the death of the Harishen, okay, how the various guilds of the artisans and the sculptor perhaps were migrated in the other regions where they were having the better opportunities. Okay. As he said that maybe some groups were shifted to the Aurangabad, maybe some groups were shifted to at Ellora, and some groups were shifted towards the western coast where the excavation of the Jogeshwari cave was initiated. Then Elephanta can be taken the same way. The Badami also can be taken the same, especially the Ravanphadi cave at Ayodhya also can take as the example where the trends of the Vakataka artists were seen. We are difficult always to trace the religious affinity of the artist, but the artists were working on the different religious affiliation. Okay? The artists who were working in the Buddhist context, suddenly they were shifting towards the Shaiva and the Vaishnavite context. And you can see that influence also. The themes, the features that were seen in the Buddhist art. Okay? Again, these terminologies are very loose, but we can see that those features, those aesthetic were tried to get brought into what the early Brahmanical arts were there. Okay? Its exhibition also shows its affiliation to the or its relation to the what the Buddhist art were there. For example, if you can take an example of the image of the Lakulish, okay, of the early phase, which shows the what the image of the Buddha was there and what the Shaiva image of the Lakulishi was there. We show the stylistic relation. Okay? The themes were brought initially, but later on, the independent concepts were evolved. Okay? And then there is the dynamic of the artist, or you can say the patron, as per what descriptions they were following, what need to be remain continue and what need to be excluded from the sculptural tradition. Interesting point is that this shows the process of the standardization in the iconographic tradition. Okay? During the Vakataka period or the early and the mature phase of the Vakataka period, there was no as such the standardization of the iconographic forms. Okay? The forms were introduced based on the descriptive information. The point is that forms were introduced based on the descriptive narrations or the descriptive information, and in the later period, onwards, late 5th century CE, towards the 6th century CE, the process of the standardization can be seen in the iconographic form. And then there is the selective, the visual examples of the imageries. You know, how to show the Vishnu, how to show an Ananta Vishnu, how to show a Narsimha, how to show the other forms of the Vishnu and the various forms of the Shiva, the various forms of the goddesses. Those were seen shifting in the late phase of the 5th and the early 6th century CE. And the best example is that how at Elephanta, okay, the Shaiva narrative themes were portrayed. Okay? How at Badami, Shaiva and the Vaishnava narrative themes were portrayed in the sculptural reliefs. Okay? This shows the legacy and the continuity of the what the early evidence that is found in the Vakataka period, or we can take out Vidarbha region, which shows the continuity and the legacy of this data, so which was moving towards the standardization or the formalization of the iconographic trends, okay, in the visual tradition.
So we express once again our profound thanks to Gopal Joge sir for this excellent talk. Pleach India Foundation also thanks the audience for their participation and making this talk very memorable. This is to inform you all that our next Pleach talk is scheduled on 18th September 2026 at 5 p.m. by Professor M.S. Krishnamurthy, who will be speaking on Talakadu, a city beneath the sand. I repeat, our next Pleach talk is scheduled on 18th September 2026 at 5 p.m. by Professor M.S. Krishnamurthy, who will be speaking on Talakadu, a city beneath the sand. Thank you. Once again, thank you, sir.
So thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much. See you. Good evening.